Sometimes life throws us moments we never see coming. What was supposed to be a formal diplomatic interview between a U.S. Congresswoman and an African president turned into something unforgettable. Something human. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had flown to Burkina Faso on what her team called routine business. Talk of regional stability, a few lines on trade. Maybe a photo op, nothing out of the ordinary. Cameras were rolling, lights were bright. Everyone expected a safe, predictable conversation. Then President Ibrahim Traoré sat down. He was calm, collected, soft-spoken, nothing flashy about him. It's just a quiet kind of presence. It's the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. The interview began smoothly. Polite exchanges, formal tones, and then Jasmine asked something simple. How do you stay hopeful? When things seem hopeless, there was a long pause. Traoré looked down. Then he looked her in the eyes, not like a leader speaking to a politician, but like one person speaking to another. And he said, hope doesn't come from speeches. It comes from graveyards. The room froze. Jasmine leaned in. Can you explain that? Traoré's voice stayed even, but his words hit hard. I've buried more friends than I've shaken hands with world leaders. One of them was my best friend, Malik. You could hear a pin drop. He died protecting a school. He continued. They shot him in the leg. He waited for help. 30 minutes, still calling, still believing someone would come. I found him with his radio in his hand. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. Her hand covered her mouth. Okay? There was no script for this moment. No one came, he said. Just me, and I was too late. There was no anger in his voice, no theatrics. It's just a steady, heartbreaking calm. And that's when something shifted. This wasn't about politics anymore. It wasn't about diplomacy. It was about grief, about truth, about what it really costs to lead when your people are dying and the world looks away. After the break, Jasmine asked him, unscripted, is there someone you think about every day? Traoré didn't T-speak. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a photo. Old, torn, black and white. 3 children stood in front of a mud house. 2 boys. 1 girl. That's us, he said quietly. Before the world broke. No headlines could capture that silence. No tweet could sum up the weight in the room. Because this wasn't just a conversation. It was a moment of truth, and it left millions speechless. Some interviews are just about policy. Others, they crack something open. As their conversation neared its end, Jasmine Crockett thought the most powerful moment had passed. She was wrong. President Ibrahim Traoré reached into his coat and gently unfolded a creased, faded photograph. 3 children, dusty feet, bright eyes, a clay home behind them. He pointed to the girl. My sister Aminata. What happened? To her, Jasmine asked quietly. He didn't look away. Malaria. She was 11. We couldn't afford proper medicine. We tried herbs, we prayed. It wasn't enough. He refolded the picture with slow, steady hands and placed it back. In his pocket, at her grave, I made a promise that no child would die just because they were born into poverty. His hands trembled slightly. This photo has followed me through war. And into this office, Jasmine wiped her eyes. Suddenly, the set lights felt distant. The cameras forgotten. It wasn't politics anymore. It was grief. Shared, seen, and understood. They had 10 minutes left, but Jasmine couldn't shift back to talking points. Not now. She leaned in. President Traoré. What do you dream of? He didn't blink. I don't dream. I stopped the day I watched my mother collapse from hunger. Jasmine froze. Gave me her last bite of rice, he said. Told me she had eaten. She hadn't eaten in 3 days. She smiled as she passed out. Tried to make it look normal. I was 15. His voice broke just slightly. To this day, when I eat, I ask myself, have I earned this? The silence was thick. Jasmine could barely speak. Finally, she whispered, I'm so sorry. He looked. at her gently, but with a firmness that had no room for pity. Don't be. Just remember. Some of us didn't grow up dreaming of changing the world. We just wanted to survive it. The cameras cut. The interview was over. But Jasmine wasn't ready to leave. She stepped outside, needing air, and that's when she saw her. A little girl, barefoot, no older than 8, standing just beyond the palace fence. She held a cardboard sign. "Can you give my mama a chance?" Jasmine turned, concerned, ready to call someone over. But President Traoré was already there. "She comes every Friday," he said softly. "Why?" Jasmine asked. "She believes if I notice her. Her mother might get a job," he explained. "The mother does laundry. No work lately. It helped quietly. Food, rent, but she didn't want charity. She wanted dignity." Then, with quiet grace, he walked over, knelt beside the girl, and handed her a folded paper. She lit up, hugged him tight. "K," and ran off smiling. "What was that?" Jasmine asked. "K job contract, full benefits." She blinked. "You don't announce these things." He shook his head. "Not everything needs a headline." And in that moment, she saw it. Some leaders chase applause. This one, he was building lives in the quiet. That evening, he invited her to a private dinner. No fanfare, no gold trim. Just a simple table, rice, beans, grilled chicken. One thing stood out, an extra chair, neatly placed, untouched. "Are we expecting someone else?" she asked. He gave a soft smile. "That's for my brother Adama." Jasmine paused. "Where's he gone?" "Taken in a raid." "I was 17. I left early that day looking for water." He stayed. That was his spot, always telling stories at dinner. He looked at the empty chair with the kind of gaze only grief can shape. "I keep it here. Not for sadness, for remembrance. To remind myself who I lead, for the ones who never got to sit at this table." Jasmine said nothing. She simply moved her chair closer and sat beside the one that never would be. Filled, outside, the city carried on. But inside, in that quiet room, the world shifted just a little. The city sparkled that night. Quiet and calm, but inside the palace, something far more powerful was unfolding. Sometimes leadership isn't about speeches or ceremonies. Sometimes it's about remembering, about making room, not just at the table, but in the heart, for those the world has forgotten. The next morning on Saturday, Jasmine Crockett asked if she could visit where it all began, President Traoré's childhood home. He paused, then nodded. They drove for a while until the road gave way to dirt, the noise of the capital replaced by rustling leaves and the occasional rooster. Eventually, they arrived at a small clay brick home on the edge of town. Inside, one narrow room. Too old. Beds, a broken fan. And a photo on the wall, a woman smiling warmly. "My mother," Traoré said softly. The air inside felt still, almost sacred, like time had paused. Curtains faded by the sun, sandals tucked under a cot, a pencil sketch taped to the wall with yellowed tape. "You've kept it all just like this?" Jasmine asked. He nodded. "This is where I first learned what hunger feels like, and also what hope tastes like." Near the window, a small metal bowl sat quietly. Jasmine pointed to it. "What's this?" He smiled faintly. She collected coins in that bowl. Every time she saved 10 francs, she put one inside. She used to say, "Change doesn't come from riches. It starts with sacrifice." The bowl was empty. But somehow it carried everything. Under the neem tree later that day, they sat in the shade behind the house. No cameras, no staff, no notes. Just wind in the branches and honesty in the air. Jasmine asked quietly, "Why do you carry so much?" Pain so silently. Traoré let the question hang for a moment. Then he answered, "Because raising your voice doesn't bring the dead back." He stared at his hands. "When I was 20, rebels captured me. They beat me, tied me, left me bleeding. One of them recognized me. We had gone to school together. I used to share my lunch with him when his mother got sick." Jasmine's breath caught. He waited until no one was watching, then untied me, told me to run. "Did you?" she whispered. "No." I begged them to spare the others, but they wouldn't. I stayed, and I watched. His voice broke just once. That moment shaped me. I try to lead like that. Boy did quietly, with mercy. There were no more questions after that. Sometimes silence says everything. The shoes that evening, back at the palace, Jasmine noticed something behind the president's desk. A tiny pair of children's shoes, worn out, dust-covered. She turned to him. "Do you have a child?" He walked over, picked up the shoes. "No," he said quietly. "These belong to a boy named Idrissa." He sat down. I met him in a displacement camp. He was 7, lone. No shoes, just plastic bags tied to his feet. He handed me these shoes and said, "You can walk. Farther than me, Mr. President." Jasmine stared at him, stunned. He died 3 days later. Pneumonia. She turned away, hiding tears. "I wanted to bury the shoes with him," he said. "But his aunt insisted I keep them. She said, 'He believed in you. Prove him right.'" He looked at the shoes, then at Jasmine. "Every step I take now, I take for the ones who didn't get to." And somehow those little shoes spoke louder than any crown ever could. The empty bed the next morning, Traoré invited Jasmine to a rural clinic outside Ouagadougou. No press, no security convoy. 2 cars. The building was worn down, tin roof, cracked walls. It's the kind of place most presidents never set foot. Inside, rows of children lay recovering. But one bed was empty. Traoré stopped beside it. This bed belonged to a boy named Thomas. He had tuberculosis. His mother carried him here on foot, 18 kilometers. Jasmine's heart sank. We only had 1 oxygen tank. Right? It wasn't working. We called for a new one from the capital. It came 2 hours too late. He looked up at this slow-spinning ceiling fan. That was the day I learned something painful. Being president doesn't always mean you can save them in time. Jasmine wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. And they stood together beside a bed that told its own story. Not just of failure, but of a leader who stayed to remember. Because sometimes true leadership isn't shown on camera. It's found in old bowls, tiny shoes, and the quiet places where the world forgets to look. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do, simply not forget. Some stories aren't meant to be told in headlines. They live in the quiet corners where no cameras reach and no applause is expected. That's where Jasmine Crockett found the truth. Not in the grandeur of palaces, but in the places where pain still lingers. The bed that stayed empty earlier. That day, President Traoré had shown her a small rural clinic. It had recently been repainted. The walls were brighter now. The fans worked. The medicines were stocked, but one bed was still empty. "We fixed everything," he said quietly, standing at its side. "Except what matters most. A boy named Thomas died here waiting for oxygen. The replacement tank came 2 hours too late." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "That bed stays," he added, not as a reminder of failure, but of what it costs to wait too long. Jasmine said nothing, because in that room, words would only weigh it down more. An unexpected visit that afternoon. They drove to a prison outside the city. No entourage, no announcement. Just a plane. Shirt on the president and sandals on his feet. Inside, they met a man named Youssef Quiet. Older eyes, soft with age, and something else. Peace. "We once fought on opposite sides," Traoré explained. "I gave the order that locked him in here." Jasmine tensed. But then Youssef stood up, reached out, and smiled. "I forgave him. He's not the man he was, and neither am I," Jasmine asked, stunned. "Why?" Youssef nodded toward the small prison library. "He changed. And I've done things I regret, too. These days, I teach the others how to read." Traoré stepped forward. "I'm not here to lead saints. I'm here to help broken people find something worth rebuilding." In that quiet cell, Jasmine saw a kind of freedom no justice system could offer, the kind born from grace, a message she couldn't send that night back in her guest quarters. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. She started typing a message to her mother. "Mom, I don't know how to explain this trip. I've cried more in 2 days than I have in 2 years. She paused, deleted it, tried again. "Today I watched a president sit with a man he once ordered imprisoned. I saw him leave flowers at a child's hospital bed." Deleted again, nothing fit. No words felt big enough. So she stood up, left her room, and found him alone, out on the palace balcony. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "You get used to carrying certain things?" She nodded slowly. "I tried to write my mom tonight, but I couldn't finish the message." He turned to her. "Some feelings don't fit into sentences. That's why we live them." She understood now. This wasn't just politics. It was healing hers and his. A soldier's final words Monday brought another visit, this time to a military outpost deep in the country. No salutes, no spectacle, just dust, concrete, and silence. They came to honor a young soldier. His name was John Baptiste, aged 23. He died protecting a school bus, Traoré said. No backup, just him. His mother stood quietly, holding a framed photo in one hand and a small leather notebook in the other. She handed it to the president. "He wrote about you," she said. Traoré flipped to the final page. "If I die before seeing peace, tell the president I still believe. He's the one to finish what we started." Jasmine turned away, eyes stinging. Traoré closed the notebook gently. "I don't lead because of power," he said. "I lead for people like him, the ones who believed, even when they never got to see the ending." The call that shook. Him that evening, just before dinner, Jasmine heard footsteps outside her room. She opened the door to find him there. Phone still in hand, shoulders heavy, face pale. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Barely. I just got off the phone with a father. His daughter was kidnapped last night. Militants in the north." Jasmine went still. "She was supposed to start school today. I promised him she'd be safe. I told him we were making progress." He looked down. "But right now, all I have are words." Jasmine reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. "You carry so much." Alone, he didn't deny it. He just stood there, silent, raw, exhausted. And in that moment, she saw what so few ever do, that behind every strong leader is a human being trying to outrun the promises that came too late. Because real leadership isn't about being strong all the time. It's about feeling it all and still showing up for the bed. It's for the boy, for the broken, for the ones who believed. Even when the world wasn't watching. There are some stories that don't make headlines, but they should, because they remind us what leadership really looks like. It began with a farewell dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled fish, beans, and a quiet table shared between two people who had nothing left to say. And yet, everything still unspoken. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had seen a lot over the past few days in Burkina Faso, but nothing hit her harder than this moment. Sitting across from President Ibrahim Traoré and realizing it was carrying more than a country. It was carrying people. Memories, regrets, promises he couldn't keep. Every face, every name, every child I couldn't protect. "They don't disappear when the cameras stop rolling," he told her, his voice low. Jasmine had followed him to prisons, to hospitals. 2 dusty military outposts where mothers still waited for sons who never came home. She watched him comfort a grieving parent after a schoolgirl, taken by militants just days after he'd promised her safety. He didn't have answers, just silence. And a hand over his face. "I will get her back," he whispered. "Even if it's the last thing I do." That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from feeling. The next morning, something told her not to leave just yet. She asked to revisit the place where she first saw the little girl with the cardboard sign. It's the one with the scarf and big eyes. They found her, same corner, same scarf, but this time her mother was standing next to her, in a clean apron, holding back tears. "She starts work today," President Traoré said quietly. "Laundry staff at the presidential residence." The woman stepped forward and wrapped him in a trembling hug. "No one saw us," she whispered. "But you did." Then the little girl handed Jasmine a tiny, crumpled flower made from scrap paper. "To remember us," she said with a smile. Jasmine knelt down, eyes filled with tears. "I won't forget," she promised. Later, on the plane back to the US, Jasmine sat with a camera reel full of footage. But one moment haunted her the most. It wasn't scripted, wasn't rehearsed. She had simply asked, "Mr. President, what's something you wish the world knew about you?" He looked down for a moment, then said, "I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be the kind of man my mother would have been proud of." That was it. No speech, no politics, just raw truth. Jasmine begged the network not to cut it. When they aired it unedited, something unexpected happened. The world stopped scrolling and started listening. Millions watched, millions cried. Veterans said it reminded them why they served. Teachers played it in classrooms. Young men posted videos with tears in their eyes. "This changed how I see leadership." And Jasmine. She stood quietly in the back of the studio, hands shaking, because she knew this wasn't just a segment. This was a moment of real humanity. 3 days later, she called President Traoré. The clip passed 50 million views. She told him, "You've become a symbol." His voice was soft on the other end. "I never wanted to be a symbol," he said. "I just wanted to serve. With love." Then came the line that stuck with her most. "Please, don't let them just talk about me. Remind them of the little girl, the mother, the soldier, the man in prison." Those are the real stories. Jasmine wiped her eyes. "Thank you, Ibrahim." "For what?" "For proving that quiet strength. It's the loudest voice of all." That night, she posted a photo, a paper flower resting beside her microphone, and wrote, "In a world of noise, one man spoke softly, and the world finally heard." Call to action, authentic and compliant. If this story moved you, take a moment. Like the video. Leave a comment below. Ask what parts stayed with you. And don't forget to subscribe. Because the world needs more stories like this. Not just about leaders, but about love, courage, and the quiet power of simply showing up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.